What gives coherence to the world, even when its surfaces contradict or dissolve? What gives substance to the subtle, shape to the invisible, continuity to experience across dimensions? These are not abstract questions in the dismissive sense. They are invitations to look beyond what the eye sees, beyond the categorical and into the foundational. In the language of Forma Sophia, we are entering the domain of underlying form, a concept that points not toward things, but toward the way things hold together. Unlike composition, which assembles or structure, which orders, underlying form refers to the invisible logic that renders a world intelligible in the first place. This is not necessarily a material logic. It can be psychic, metaphysical, algorithmic, or even aesthetic. It is what precedes manifestation, what makes perception meaningful, and what allows transformation without collapse. This video explores 3 dimensions of this idea: the epistemology of the invisible, multidimensional coherence, and symbolic abstraction as a carrier of underlying form. The epistemology of the invisible. To speak of an underlying form is to posit that something unseen governs the scene. This act requires a leap, not of faith, but of framework. It shifts our focus from what appears to how appearance is made possible. Much of our intellectual heritage resists this shift. Empiricism, as a modern epistemology, privileges the visible and the measurable. But even the most rigorous sciences rely on unobservable postulates, quantum states, ideal conditions, thought experiments. Theoretical physics especially is a story of abstraction retroactively shaping observation. We model what we cannot see to explain what we can. Mystical traditions and esoteric philosophies often begin not with objects, but with templates. The Kabbalistic tree of life, the Pythagorean tetractys, the I Ching's hexagrams, these are not mere symbols but representations of generative logic. They encode a sense that form exists prior to matter, and that the visible is the final, not the initial act of expression. Underlying form, then, is not a shadow beneath the surface, but a condition of possibility. It is the meta-structure that enables worlds to arise, be inhabited and interpreted. It is not behind reality, but folded into its syntax. Multidimensional coherence. Underlying form reveals itself most vividly at the edge of dimensional thought. The moment we begin to think not just in 3 dimensions, but in 4, 5, or beyond. Whether geometrically, temporally, or ontologically, we must rely on abstraction to maintain coherence. The tesseract or 4D hypercube becomes a perfect metaphor here. We cannot directly visualize it, but its logical integrity resonates across projections. Its form persists through distortion. This persistence across dimensions suggests that underlying form is that which retains identity through transformation. Multidimensionality is not simply about added space, it's about increased complexity of interaction. In systems theory, this might take the form of attractor states or feedback loops. In consciousness studies, it could refer to nested states of awareness. In spiritual cosmologies, dimensions may correspond to frequencies of being or densities of matter. Across disciplines, coherence across dimensional layers implies the presence of a deeper structural language, one not always seen, but continually felt. Underlying form is the bridge between phenomena and their unspoken organizing principles. Symbolic, encoding, and abstract language. If underlying form is often inaccessible to direct observation, then how do we engage it? One method is through symbolic abstraction. Symbols operate as containers for form that exceeds linear expression. A symbol can mean more than one thing at once, and it can represent things not yet understood. It is not merely shorthand, it is surplus. The spiral, the mirror, the axis mundi. These are forms that transcend time and culture because they reflect not outer phenomena, but inner configurations. They are compressed cosmologies, where inner and outer realities are unified through symbolic gesture. Mathematics, too, is a symbolic system for engaging the abstract. Geometry and number are not just quantitative, they're qualitative, expressive, and metaphysically rich. Sacred geometry, for instance, uses pattern to suggest principles of cosmic order. The circle, triangle, and golden ratio are treated as sacred not because they are pretty, but because they recur at every scale of reality. Language itself, when freed from the need to describe surfaces, can begin to encode form. Myth, poetry, and metaphor are all modes by which we intuit structure. As post-structural theorists observed, meaning is never final, but patterned in relation. These relational structures reflect the role of underlying form in perception and cognition alike. The metaphysics of stability in motion. Underlying form is not static. Paradoxically, it remains stable through motion. It is the reason transformation doesn't destroy identity, and why emergence doesn't imply incoherence. In Whitehead's Metaphysics of Process, this is framed through the idea of eternal objects, pure forms that pattern events without themselves being events. In mystical frameworks, this resonates with the idea of archetypes, eternal templates of experience. Jung regarded archetypes as forms without content, preconditions of perception itself. They do not act, but they shape all that does. In Tibetan metaphysics, the Dharmadhatu, realm of pure form, is understood as a subtle field that gives rise to phenomena without being a phenomenon itself. This form of all forms is not easily localized. It is not a hidden mechanism, but a generative rhythm. It may show up as the resonance in music, the proportion in architecture, or the unfolding sequence of dream logic. It is less like a blueprint and more like a tuning fork, structuring through vibration, not imposition. A form-attuned perception. To study underlying form is to refine perception. It means looking into reality rather than merely at it. This is not mystification, but precision. It is an invitation to become sensitive to the architecture of coherence, to the abstract scaffolding that makes both reality and consciousness legible. Underlying form is not about certainty. It is about pattern, rhythm, and relation. Its domain is the in-between, between dimensions, between disciplines, between the visible and the ineffable. To explore it is to sense structure in silence, intelligence in void, and potential in the abstract. And in doing so, we glimpse the sublime not as spectacle, but as form, not as escape, but as foundation.